When a seemingly ordinary woman walks into a luxury hotel, little does the arrogant manager know that she's about to turn his world upside down with a shocking revelation. The revolving doors whispered shut behind her as Camille Rhodes stepped into the grand lobby of the St. Haven Luxury Hotel. The polished marble floor reflected the soft glow of chandelier light, and the quiet hush of elegance floated in the air like perfume. Every corner of the space was designed to impress. Gold-trimmed columns, velvet lounge chairs, and a concierge desk carved from rare wood. But Camille wasn't here to be impressed. She moved with the ease of someone who belonged, though nothing about her entrance demanded attention. No entourage, no clicking heels, no designer label logos screaming for validation. Just understated elegance. A crisp navy blazer, tailored slacks, soft leather flats. Her coiled curls were pulled back into a low bun, and a single gold stud adorned each ear. She didn't need to announce who she was. Her presence spoke louder than status ever could. As she crossed the lobby, a few heads turned. Subtle glances, curious looks. She offered no smile, no acknowledgement. Her eyes scanned the room, precise, but not hurried. She walked like she'd done this 1,000 times before. Behind the front desk, Mason Whitaker noticed her. His posture stiffened slightly. Mid-50s, pressed suit, silver hair slicked back with gel. He prided himself on keeping the right kind of clientele in and the wrong kind out. He watched Camille with the wary eye of someone trying to solve a puzzle they didn't like the look of. She didn't carry a suitcase. She didn't approach the check-in desk right away. She paused near a grand floral arrangement in the center of the lobby, admiring the fresh-cut orchids, and then began to make her way toward the elevators. Mason's jaw tightened. His gaze followed her like a spotlight. Something about the quiet confidence in her walk unnerved him. Camille knew. She felt the shift the moment she stepped through the doors. The way eyes lingered too long, how staff straightened in place. She was used to it. She had walked into 1,000 rooms like this one, where her skin spoke louder than her title, her presence questioned before she ever opened her mouth. But still, she walked with her chin level, her back straight, and her steps unbroken. This wasn't just another visit. This was her quarterly inspection, one she had purposely chosen to conduct unannounced. She didn't want anyone rolling out a red carpet. She wanted to see the place as it really was, and that meant arriving without warning, without armor. Because Camille Rhodes wasn't just a guest. She owned the entire hotel chain, but no one here knew that. Not yet. What would you have done if you saw someone being silently judged for just walking in? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter. Mason Whitaker stood behind the polished oak front desk, arms folded neatly across his chest, eyes scanning the lobby like a hawk guarding a nest. The late afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow across the marble floor. Everything appeared just as it should, until he saw her. She walked with purpose, slow, deliberate steps, no hesitation, no glancing around nervously, but something about her unsettled him. She didn't have a suitcase, no assistant, no man trailing behind her. She wasn't clutching a reservation printout like most travelers. She wasn't dressed in designer brands that screamed money. No stiletto heels, no diamonds, just flats? A blazer? Who came into his hotel like that? Mason narrowed his eyes. His initial assumption was simple. She was lost. Maybe looking for someone. A wedding guest who wandered into the wrong building. Maybe someone making a delivery. He had seen it before. People thinking this place was open to just anyone. But this was the Saint. Haven, one of the most exclusive 5-star hotels in the city, and he was the gatekeeper. He stepped slightly forward, fingers resting on the edge of the desk, watching her like a security camera. His professional smile faded, replaced by quiet scrutiny. She paused at the floral display, her gaze falling briefly on the orchids, then turned toward the elevators. Mason's jaw clenched. Guests don't go to the elevators without checking in first. Not unless they're hiding something. Not unless they don't belong. Still, she walked like she'd done this before. Like the place was hers. That only made his suspicion worse. He straightened his tie and tapped the desk lightly, alerting the concierge beside him. "Keep an eye on that woman," he said under his breath. The concierge followed his gaze, then glanced back at Mason, unsure. Did she check in already? Number and she's headed for the elevators. His tone was sharp now, clipped. The woman hadn't said a word yet, but Mason was already writing her story in his mind. She didn't look the part. She didn't fit the image of the guests he was trained to welcome with champagne and smiles. He made a mental note, firm but polite. Don't cause a scene, but be ready to call security if it escalates. She was heading straight for him now. Mason shifted his weight forward, preparing to intercept. He still thought he was in control. He had no idea who she was, no idea how much trouble he was walking into. Have you ever been judged before you said a single word? Let us know in the comments. And if this story's got you hooked, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned. Camille stepped forward, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor, her posture poised and calm. She approached the front desk with a quiet assurance, one earned through years of building an empire from the ground up. Her expression was serene but focused. She was here for business, nothing more. Before she could part her lips to speak, Mason raised a hand and spoke first. "Check-in is for guests only," he said flatly. His words sliced through the space between them. Cold, dismissive, not a question, not a greeting, a warning. Camille blinked just once. Her posture didn't shift, but there was a subtle change in her eyes, like a curtain pulling back slightly, exposing the truth behind the polished veneer. "I'm aware," she said evenly. Mason didn't budge. His lips pulled into a tight, strained smile, the kind that masked irritation behind false courtesy. He didn't ask for her name, didn't ask if she had a reservation, didn't bother to look at the screen in front of him. He saw her skin, her outfit, the way she came in alone, and made his decision in a heartbeat. Camille let the silence stretch for a moment, studying him. The confidence in her voice didn't waver. "I'd like to speak with the general manager." Mason's brows lifted slightly, and a smirk played on the edge of his mouth. "You're speaking to him." That same smile, a bit too smug, a bit too sure of itself, returned to his face. He crossed his arms, waiting, expecting her to shrink, to apologize, to explain herself. They usually did, after all. Camille didn't flinch. "Then perhaps you can assist me." Mason's eyes narrowed. "Ma'am," he said, voice dipped in that overly formal tone that masked condescension. "If you're here to meet someone, I suggest you wait outside. We don't allow loitering in the lobby." A few nearby guests glanced over. One woman behind Camille shifted her stance, curious now. The receptionist next to Mason looked down at her monitor, trying to pretend she wasn't listening. Camille kept her gaze steady. Her tone didn't rise. She didn't match his arrogance with anger. She didn't need to. "I don't think you understand," she said softly. "I have business here." Mason gave a small chuckle. Tight. Patronizing. "Unless that business includes a reservation, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." He still hadn't asked for her name, still hadn't touched his keyboard. He didn't need proof. He had made up his mind the moment she walked in. Camille exhaled slowly, barely audible. Her expression didn't change, but something about her presence seemed to grow heavier, more defined. "You're making assumptions," she said, her voice even, her words deliberate. "And that's going to be a problem. What would you do if someone dismissed you before you even spoke? Drop your thoughts in the comments and make sure you're subscribed for what happens next. Camille didn't blink. Her voice remained calm, her tone smooth as silk. "I'd like to speak with someone above you," she said. Mason's smirk widened, leaning slightly over the desk as if amused. "That would be me," he replied, his voice dipped in mock patience. "There is no one above me on site." Camille tilted her head slightly. No frustration, no raised voice, just precision. "Then I'd suggest contacting corporate." Mason scoffed. Actually scoffed. "Ma'am," he said, and the way he dragged that word out made it sound like an insult. "If you're not a guest at this hotel, I'm going to have to ask you to step outside." He motioned toward the glass doors behind her, subtle but firm. The message was clear. You don't belong here. Camille held her ground, her hands loosely clasped in front of her. The restraint in her posture was telling. She wasn't rattled. She wasn't defensive. She was watching. "Is that your standard protocol?" she asked, voice low but steady. "Turning people away without checking if they have business here?" Mason's smile faded just slightly. "I don't have time to argue. We have high-profile guests arriving this evening, and I won't let anyone disrupt that experience." Camille's brows raised ever so slightly, amused more than surprised. "Interesting," she murmured. "So you decide who qualifies as a disruption based solely on appearance?" A guest walking by slowed, subtly eavesdropping. Another paused a few feet away, pretending to look at a brochure rack. Mason noticed, and his voice dipped lower. "I don't need to explain myself," he said, teeth clenched behind a tight smile. "This is a private property. I'm responsible for maintaining order. And you—" He gestured toward her with an open palm, dismissive and final. "Are not checked in, not listed as a guest, and not entitled to be here without authorization. So unless you have someone here to vouch for you, I suggest you leave, or I will involve security." Camille stared at him for a moment, studying his face, not with fear, with calculated silence. Then she reached into her blazer pocket, pulled out her phone, and typed something with practiced efficiency. No rush, no panic, just control. "You're making a mistake," she said softly, eyes still on the screen. "A very public one." Mason chuckled, but it was a little less confident now. "Threats won't help you, ma'am." Camille slid the phone back into her pocket, her gaze lifting to meet his. "It wasn't a threat," she said. "It was a courtesy." If you've ever watched someone mistake arrogance for authority, you already know what's coming. Tell us what you would have done, and don't forget to subscribe. The storm is just getting started. The tension in the air thickened like fog. Camille stood still, her expression unreadable, her presence unwavering. Across the marble lobby, soft chatter dimmed into awkward silence. A few guests glanced up from their phones. Others slowed their steps, curious. The subtle discomfort of watching something unfold, something that shouldn't be happening, but no one quite brave enough to step in. Mason's voice rose, just loud enough to make sure everyone within earshot caught it. "Security, we've got a situation at the front desk." The words dropped like a stone in water, sharp, embarrassing, public. Camille didn't move, didn't flinch. She simply reached into her blazer and pulled out her phone again. Her fingers moved with quiet intention. She wasn't scrolling. She wasn't checking the time. She was typing. One message. Sent. Then she tucked the phone back into her pocket as calmly as she'd taken it out. Mason noticed and scoffed, louder this time. "Calling backup?" he sneered. "Unless you're calling someone who can book you a room, I'd suggest putting that away." No response. Camille simply watched him, measured, composed. She could have shouted, she could have demanded, but she didn't need to, because power doesn't always show itself in volume. Sometimes it shows itself in restraint. From the far corner of the lobby, a mother subtly pulled her young daughter a little closer. A businessman seated near the lounge shifted uncomfortably in his chair, now fully tuned in. The concierge behind Mason glanced nervously between them, her fingers hovering just above the keyboard. Mason turned to a nearby employee. "Where's Greg?" he barked. "Get him up here, now!" Camille exhaled slowly. She wasn't humiliated, but Mason wanted her to be. That was the goal. Make a scene, put her in her place, strip her of dignity without ever raising a hand. But what Mason didn't understand was that you can't strip dignity from someone who never handed it over in the first place. A uniformed security guard emerged from the hallway, his steps quick but uncertain. He glanced between Camille and Mason, sensing something off. "This woman is trespassing," Mason announced, gesturing with his chin. "Please escort her outside until she can provide proof that she belongs here." The words echoed across the lobby. Camille tilted her head slightly, not angry, not defensive, just watching him dig his own grave. "I'm giving you one last chance to walk out on your own," Mason said, his voice booming with false confidence. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loaded, with eyes, with judgment, with something that felt like regret waiting to be earned. And Camille? She just stood there, calm, silent, knowing exactly what was coming next. What would you have done in Camille's shoes? Say it in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss what happens when truth walks through the door. Mason stood tall behind the desk, arms folded, lips pursed, convinced he had just won. Convinced he had handled a problem before it could become a scene. But the real scene had already started. And he wasn't directing it. Just a few minutes earlier, Camille's fingers had tapped a message so simple, yet so seismic, that it sent a ripple through the company before Mason even finished his self-congratulatory sigh. Incident at St. Haven downtown. Discrimination at front desk. Handle accordingly. The message bypassed middle management. It bypassed customer service. It bypassed the PR team. It went straight to the board of directors, because Camille Rhodes didn't just own the building she was being asked to leave. She owned the name on the door. She was the founder, the CEO, the visionary behind the Rhodes Luxury Group, a hospitality empire that spanned continents. And she built it from the ground up, not from privilege, not from inheritance, but from persistence, from long nights and bold risks, from being looked over, dismissed, talked down to, from walking into rooms where people didn't think she belonged, and buying the building instead. At the very top of the company, her name was more than just a signature. It was policy. So when her message hit the phones of the executives across the globe, alarms were triggered, calls were made, meetings interrupted. And the tone was clear. Drop everything. Camille's on site. There's a problem. At the front desk, Mason had no clue the sky was already falling. He gestured toward the security guard again, his voice sharp and confident. "Ma'am, we've been patient. You either step out or you'll be escorted out." Camille remained still, her expression unreadable. Behind her, guests continued to murmur. Some filmed with their phones discreetly angled. Others exchanged glances, unsure whether to speak up or stay quiet. Camille had dealt with people like Mason before, people who confuse uniforms with power, people who believe authority means control, not accountability. But she didn't build an empire by shouting back at every insult. She built it by letting people reveal themselves fully and loudly, right before she made her next move. Her phone buzzed once. She didn't check it. She didn't need to. The wheels were already in motion. And Mason? He kept talking, kept dismissing, kept assuming, all while unknowingly standing on the very rug that was about to be pulled out from under him. Ever seen someone play checkers while the other person's playing chess? Hit that like button if you're ready to see the board flipped, and don't forget to subscribe for the moment everything changes. The revolving doors parted with a whisper as a sleek black luxury sedan pulled up to the curb. The driver stepped out, polished and brisk, moving with the kind of precision that didn't beg for attention, but commanded it anyway. Moments later, two sharply dressed individuals emerged from the car, one in a deep charcoal suit, the other in a slate-gray pencil skirt and blazer, both moving with quiet urgency. Their stride was direct, unapologetic, purposeful. They didn't pause to admire the chandelier, didn't glance at the front desk, didn't scan the room for direction. They knew exactly where they were going. Camille didn't look up when they entered. She didn't need to. The energy in the room shifted the second they stepped through the lobby doors. Guests who had been whispering fell silent. The receptionist stiffened. Even the concierge instinctively straightened her posture, sensing a sudden change in air pressure. But Mason, he didn't notice right away. His focus was still on Camille, his tone still laced with impatience. "I'm giving you a final warning," he said, forcing a smile. "This isn't going to end well if you keep—" "Excuse me," a smooth voice interrupted, slicing through the moment like a knife through silk. Mason turned. The two assistants were already in front of the desk, their IDs clipped neatly to their jackets, the gold Rhodes Group insignia gleaming under the lobby lights. The man spoke first. "Is there a problem with Ms. Rhodes?" Mason blinked. Once. Twice. The name didn't register at first. I'm sorry, who?" The woman stepped forward. "Camille Rhodes, the owner." Her voice was crisp, no room for misunderstanding. "We're here to meet her." Mason's confusion flickered visibly, his face twitching as if trying to recalibrate. He turned slowly toward Camille, who was now standing, calm and composed, hands clasped loosely in front of her. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. It hit him then. The name, the presence, the calm, the message she had typed, the mistake, all of it. His jaw slackened slightly. I wasn't aware." "Clearly," the assistant said, her tone flat. Mason's hands fumbled to rest on the desk, suddenly unsure where to place themselves. His voice dropped, flustered. "There must have been a miscommunication." "No," Camille said quietly, finally speaking. "There wasn't." For the first time, his authority cracked. The confidence that had filled his voice minutes ago now drained from his face, replaced with something far less secure. The assistants stepped beside Camille, one offering a folder, the other holding a tablet. No explanation, no dramatics. Just business, just order being restored. If you've ever watched someone realize, too late, that they picked the wrong one, you already know what comes next. Drop your thoughts below and stay tuned. The reckoning is just beginning. The assistant turned slowly, eyes fixed on Mason with razor-sharp precision. "Is there a problem with Ms. Rhodes?" she asked, her voice smooth and deadly calm. "The owner of this hotel?" The words struck like thunder, low and direct, but loud enough to hush the entire lobby. Gasps echoed almost instantly. A woman near the concierge audibly inhaled. A couple sitting in the lounge exchanged wide-eyed glances. A bellhop froze mid-step, his cart suddenly forgotten. Even the soft background music, once barely noticeable, now felt like it didn't belong. And Mason? His face drained of color, ghost white. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His eyes darted from Camille to the assistants and back again, searching for some kind of escape hatch that didn't exist. I didn't realize," he stammered, his voice suddenly thin. The male assistant tilted his head slightly, unimpressed. "You didn't recognize the founder of the Rhodes Luxury Group?" Camille stood quietly between them, watching Mason crumble without ever lifting her voice. She had said so little, and yet her silence was now louder than anything in the room. Mason tried to recover. "I didn't mean to cause any offense," he said quickly, his hands up in a strange, awkward gesture of defense. There was just some confusion and her name wasn't... She never gave you her name. The female assistant cut in, her tone now sharper, because you never asked. More gasps, more side glances. A guest subtly lifted their phone, recording now just in case. Camille finally stepped forward. Her heels touched the marble with soft authority, each click echoing like punctuation. She stopped just a few feet from Mason, her gaze cool and level. "You judged me," she said, her voice clear. "You assumed, without a word from me, that I didn't belong. You saw what you wanted to see, and you acted on it." Mason tried to speak again, but the words tangled in his throat. His usual confidence was nowhere to be found. His arms hung limp at his sides. Camille didn't flinch. "I didn't raise my voice," she continued. "I didn't cause a scene. I gave you every opportunity to treat me with basic respect. And instead, you escalated. Publicly." The weight of the moment hung heavy, not just on Mason, but on everyone watching. Because this wasn't just about Camille. It was about every time someone like her walked into a space they had already earned, and was told, "You don't belong here." Now, the man who had dismissed her was standing exposed. His assumptions, his arrogance, his mistake, laid bare under the same spotlight he thought he controlled. Ever seen karma arrive in a tailored suit? Hit that like button and drop a comment if you felt that shift. The real consequences start next. Camille stepped forward, her movements unhurried, deliberate. The soft click of her flats echoed across the marble as she closed the distance between her and Mason. Her eyes didn't leave him. There was no anger on her face, no raised brow, no trembling lip, just calm, controlled power. "You didn't even ask for my name," she said, her voice low but unwavering. "You just assumed I didn't belong here." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They sliced clean, each syllable landing like a quiet verdict. Mason's mouth opened, but no defense came. Just a shallow breath and the panicked shuffle of a man trying to rewind time with his eyes. Camille stood still, her expression composed, almost gentle, but there was no softness in her tone. "You made a decision the moment I walked in," she continued, "not based on behavior, not on protocol, on something else entirely." Whispers rose at the edges of the lobby. Guests leaned in, watching from behind columns, peeking from behind cell phones angled just so. The front desk clerk looked down, cheeks burning, pretending to be busy with the monitor. Camille's words didn't rise, but their impact did. "You humiliated me," she said calmly, "publicly. You called security. You dismissed me. You tried to make me small." Mason took a shaky step back. I didn't know who you were." "That's the point," she interrupted, still steady. "You didn't know, and you didn't care to." She let the silence linger. Not awkward, not uncomfortable, intentional. He squirmed in it. "Is this how you treat every guest who doesn't look like they fit your expectations?" she asked, her tone cool but piercing. "Or just the ones that look like me?" Mason's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. "It was a mistake," he mumbled. "A misunderstanding." Camille's gaze sharpened. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. Behind her, one of the assistants quietly tapped something into a tablet. Another guest muttered, "Wow," under their breath. A bellhop turned away, as if trying to disappear into the wall. "You wear that name tag like it gives you power," Camille said, nodding at the shiny badge pinned to Mason's chest. "But power without accountability isn't leadership. It's just ego." The silence that followed was suffocating. No one moved. No one breathed too loud. Mason's shoulders sagged slightly. His authority, once inflated and loud, now shriveled under the weight of the truth. Camille didn't need to shout. She didn't need to demand. Her presence did all the speaking. Her words were already doing what they were meant to do. Hold the mirror up. Ever seen someone dismantle arrogance with nothing but grace and truth? Tell us in the comments, and stay tuned, because Camille isn't finished yet. The tension hadn't left the lobby. If anything, it had deepened, settled into the air like a heavy fog. Guests lingered in corners, some pretending to scroll their phones, others watching openly now. The buzz of quiet speculation filled the room like static. Then the front doors parted again. 2 more figures entered, corporate. You could tell by the way they moved, shoulders squared, suits immaculate, expressions unreadable. They didn't glance around. They didn't hesitate. They went straight to the front desk. "Where is Mason Whitaker?" one of them asked crisply. Mason flinched at the sound of his name, then raised a hand half-heartedly. "Here," he said, his voice stripped of all earlier confidence. "Step aside," the taller one said. "We need to speak with you privately." He motioned toward a hallway just off the main lobby. Mason hesitated, glancing toward Camille like she might intervene. She didn't. She simply turned and walked to the sitting area nearby, calm, composed, not saying a word. The hallway wasn't soundproof. Voices rose, Mason's first, strained and defensive, then lower murmurs from corporate. "You don't understand, she never gave her name. She walked in, ignored all procedures. I was doing my job, keeping the environment safe." Then silence, because someone had pulled up the security footage. The footage that showed Mason ignoring protocol. The footage that showed Camille trying to speak and Mason cutting her off again and again. The footage that matched every guest witness watching from the lobby now, nodding silently. 15 minutes later, Mason returned. His face was pale, his lips pressed tight. His badge was gone. Camille stood slowly, her eyes locked on him. He tried one last time, voice barely above a whisper. "Ms. Rhodes, please." "I didn't mean—" She held up one hand, not to silence him, to finish it. "You're fired," she said. 3 words, software, final. "Effective immediately." Gasps rippled across the room. The guests didn't cheer, but they didn't hide their reactions either. A woman at the concierge gave a barely audible, "Wow." The bellhop from earlier gave a slow nod, lips pressed together in quiet approval. Even the security guard standing off to the side looked slightly relieved. Mason stood frozen for a moment, like he hadn't heard her right. But her gaze didn't waver. There was no room left for negotiation, no appeal. "You made a choice," Camille said quietly. "Now live with it." He turned slowly, walking toward the doors he once guarded like a gatekeeper. Now just a man without a title, without authority, and without the power he thought protected him. Ever seen justice served without raising a voice? Comment below. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time. The best part is still coming. The silence that followed Mason's exit was thick, like the last note of a long symphony hanging in the air. And then it broke. A single clap, slow, quiet. From the businessman seated in the lounge chair near the window. Then another, from the woman near the elevator who had been watching since the beginning. A few more followed, soft, respectful, but filled with something undeniable. Relief. The applause wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the kind that meant something, not just approval, but recognition of truth, of courage, of everything that had just unfolded in front of their eyes. Camille didn't bow. She didn't smile. She just nodded once, acknowledging the moment, and turned her attention to the front desk. There, half hidden behind a monitor, stood the young woman who had been stationed next to Mason the entire time. Her name tag read, Elena. early 20s, nervous, kind eyes. She'd kept her head down, unsure whether to intervene, afraid of saying the wrong thing. But Camille had noticed everything. When Mason raised his voice, Elena flinched. When security was called, she looked away, ashamed. And when the assistants arrived, she glanced at Camille, not with suspicion, but with quiet apology. Now, Elena stood with her shoulders tense, unsure if she should meet Camille's eyes or disappear behind the desk. Camille walked over, slow and calm, the way she always moved when it mattered most. "Elena," she said softly. The young woman blinked in surprise, her voice caught in her throat. Yes, ma'am?" "You saw what was happening," Camille said. "You knew it was wrong." Elena's eyes dropped. I wanted to say something, I didn't know if it was my place." Camille gave a small, reassuring nod. Sometimes the right thing isn't loud. Sometimes it's the person who holds back but doesn't look away that tells me everything I need to know. Elena looked up, stunned. Camille turned to the assistant nearest her. "File her promotion paperwork. Immediately." Gasps echoed again, but this time they were warm. "Wait! What?" Elena breathed. You're promoting me?" "To guest services supervisor," Camille said. "Your empathy matters, and I want leaders who lead with that first." Tears welled in Elena's eyes, and she nodded rapidly, trying to hold it together. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Camille smiled, small but real. "Don't thank me. Just make sure the next person like me doesn't have to stand alone." The clapping returned, louder now. From staff, from guests, from people who hadn't spoken up, but knew they had just witnessed something important. Not just a firing, not just a correction, a shift. If you've ever felt unseen and hoped someone would notice, you're not alone. Tell us your story in the comments, and stay close. Camille still has one more message to deliver. Bright studio lights cast a warm glow across the stage as the cameras rolled. The nation watched, on TVs, phones, tablets, as Camille Rhodes sat poised across from the host of one of the most watched news shows in the country. She wasn't draped in diamonds, no theatrics, just a tailored navy suit, soft makeup, and the same quiet confidence that had brought an entire hotel lobby to a standstill. The interviewer leaned forward, her voice curious but respectful. "Ms. Rhodes, the video of the incident has now reached over 12 million views. People are calling it a masterclass in grace and power. What do you want them to take away from what happened?" Camille didn't hesitate. "This isn't about me," she said, her voice calm but direct. "It's about what happens every day to people who are judged before they speak, before they show ID, before they can defend themselves. It's about the assumptions made in a split second, based on skin, status, and silence." The studio went still. She continued, her eyes focused, her tone unwavering. "I've walked into rooms like that my entire life, but I didn't create Rhodes Luxury to be just another name on a building. I created it to change the standard." The interviewer nodded slowly, visibly moved. "And what does that change look like now?" Camille turned toward the camera. Director, intentional. "As of today," she said, "we're implementing mandatory anti-bias training across all Rhodes Luxury properties. Every employee, no matter their rank, will be required to complete it quarterly." A beat. "We're also establishing a guest equity division, dedicated to reviewing complaints of discrimination, both staff and guest-related, and we're rolling out anonymous feedback channels so employees can report misconduct without fear." On social media, the live stream lit up. Respect is the standard. Rhodes reform. Camille speaks. Camille folded her hands gently in her lap. "If I had shouted that day, if I had caused a scene, some people would have dismissed me as difficult. But staying silent doesn't mean staying small. I let the system reveal itself so I could correct it. The interviewer leaned back, visibly impressed. You're using this moment for more than just a response. You're using it to lead. Camille smiled. Not wide, not for show, just enough. Respect isn't optional, she said, her voice cutting through the air like a closing signature. It's the standard. That line echoed across every screen, every platform, every office break room where the clip played on loop. Because this wasn't just a story, it was a statement. And Camille Rhodes had made it impossible to ignore. If you believe respect should never have to be earned, only honored, share this story. Comment below. And remember, real change doesn't come from a title. It comes from what you do when no one expects you to lead.